So I was asked, I put out a call to say, what kind of things do you want to talk about in the workplace? And one of the examples I was given was what happens when somebody went for a leadership role, didn't get the leadership role, someone else did, and now they report into that leader. This happens all the time. It can happen in educational institutions, it can happen in private, it can happen in all settings. So what do we do? So the first thing that I just want everyone to keep in mind is that when you go for an interview, you go for bringing what you have to the role and seeing if it's a match. And if you don't get that job, which often happens, one of the big issues is how do you interact with your current role? The example that the person sent to me who was worried and dealing with it was that actually the person who didn't get the role is now being really negative, problematic, blocking the senior leader. In a funny way, that's evidence that they don't deserve the role. So let me explain. When people who are willing to put the group before themselves, the organization, the purpose, their role, when they don't get roles, they take up their role and they do it well. When people act out their frustrations, their feelings, it's all about them and they're acting it out, it demonstrates that they may not have the capacity to be a leader in the first place. And that's really important to acknowledge, that when we don't regulate our emotions, manage it, process things, we often are demonstrating that we weren't ready for the leadership role at all. So if you're someone who hasn't got it and you've been acting out frustration, I would say think about that, right? Like think about it a bit more deeply, okay? The other thing is what do you do when you're managing this person? I say it's really important to call it out. Say, I appreciate you didn't get this role. I appreciate that, that you're going to have feelings about this. I appreciate that you wish you got the role, but we have to move forward. How do we do that? And then if the person is acting in an unhelpful way, blocking things, being problematic, I address it overtly. I say, I've noticed since I've got the role or since this person got the role, you're not helpful. I noticed that you are sabotaging. I noticed that. And it might not stop the behavior. And depending on what kind of organization you're in, you may not be able to remove the person or put them on a performance improvement plan. Like there's all different setups, right? But at least when we name things, we leave people responsible for them. So by naming things, we aren't feeding into this invisible power struggle. We're naming it. We're saying, I see that. I see that that's a problem, right? So when you're getting into these dynamics, it's really worth thinking about, what are you afraid to name? What are you uncomfortable with? Because whatever you're uncomfortable with is going to stop you naming what you're seeing. Now, if your organization has unions involved, if the person is kind of dressing it up and pretending that it has nothing to do with that, okay, it's going to be a little bit harder to address. But you can still address it in the here and now. You can say, I'm really disappointed with how you handle that. It feels like you're sabotaging. I'd really like to see you be more cooperative. They may not change their behavior, but the difference is you aren't playing into the drama, the dynamic, the invisible power struggle. If we can't use performance improvement plans, we can't use policies, procedures, processes, depending on your organization. If you can, you should be using them. But if you can't, then it's your job not to buy into the delusion or not to buy into the drama and to name it and to address it. That's not acceptable here. We can't have it that way. It's to leave the responsibility of their behavior to the person behaving that way. Now, people get bruised and hurt in these processes. And so when that happens, it's worth helping the person think about the value that they add in their current role. That's also a valuable thing to do. But it depends how far it's gone. From the comment that I'm responding to, I get a feeling it's gone maybe a bit far to be just thinking about the purpose of their role. It sounds like it's inappropriate. And so it's really important to think about, how am I going to name that so that I don't just avoid it because of the discomfort or because of the conflict, or the person is using their mood basically and their feelings to dictate how they're going to interact with people at work, which then has an impact in the work environment. We might not, and we often can't change other people, but we can decide not to be controlled by their behavior. So we can decide how we're going to behave regardless of how they behave, such as naming things, identifying things, moving forward. In some situations, we can't change how they're behaving, but we can make sure that we aren't colluding with it in some way. And so the best thing you can do in a setting where you can't do a PIP, where you have already tried to engage with them in terms of what they can do in their current role, what we can do is not buy into it, not engage with it. They're still going to have it. They're still going to feel it. They're still going to interact. They're still going to be that way. Or possibly they could be. That's not the point. The point is that your behavior and your way of leading and managing and behaving is not dictated by how they act and how they behave. And you're not being controlled by that fear of conflict. If you have any comments or questions, or you want me to address a different question, if somebody listening would like a question addressed in the next couple of weeks, then pop me a DM. They're confidential. I don't disclose. I remove identifying information. And I can talk about that situation, because I think real life situations are the best way that we can work together, and it will lead us to better outcomes.